Good evening. Welcome to this Audit and Governance and Standards Committee meeting. Could I ask everyone to note the fire safety instruction on hearing the alarm? You should leave the chamber via the double doors at the back, exit the building through the main entrance and congregate in the car park. Also, please switch off your mobile phones and turn any other electronic devices being used to silent. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting is subject to an internet webcast recording where the proceedings are capable of repeated viewing. If you are seated in the public area of the council chamber, it is likely that your image will be captured by the recording cameras and result in your image becoming part of the broadcast. This may infringe your human rights, and if you wish to avoid this, you should leave the public seating area of the council chamber and move to the upper public gallery. If members are for any reason not present for the whole debate on an item, you should consider and seek advice as necessary on whether it would be appropriate for you to vote on that item. May I remind members to declare any interests when this item is raised on the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. Mrs. Borman, do we have any apologies?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Apologies have been received from Councillor Gascoigne and Councillor Gregory is substituting. Councillor Clark has also sent apologies.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any interests to be considered? Thank you. Item 3, minutes from the previous meeting. Is it your wish that I sign as a correct record the minutes of the Audit and Governance Committee held on the 16th of March 2026, which begin at page 5 of the agenda?
Agreed.
Thank you. Members, I propose a motion to vary the agenda to hear item 11, appointment of the independent person, as the next item. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 11, appointment of an independent person, audit, page 3 of the supplementary agenda. The Audit, Governance and Standards Committee approves the appointment of an independent person for audit business in line with best practice. Mrs. Mayhew and Mr. Dickinson, do you have anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. I've nothing to add, but happy to take any questions, Mr. Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair. So, happy to take questions.
Questions from the committee? I'm not seeing any hands. The recommendation before the committee is as follows. R1, that the committee agrees to appoint Paul McLaughlin as the independent person audit for 2026 to 2028. Do I have a seconder?
Have a second, Chair.
Thank you. A vote should be taken by a show of hands. All those for? That's unanimous, thank you. The motion is carried. Ms. McLaughlin, would you like to introduce yourself to the committee?
Yes, I've been on the committee for the last 2 years, or its previous incarnations there. I had a career where I started off as an external auditor with the National Audit Office, moved into internal audit, spent quite a chunk of my career in social housing, had a couple of spells in local government in Havering and Hackney. I'm now on the road to retirement and have taken up a number of audit committee positions. So I'm also a committee member at Essex Police Fire Crime Commissioner and Liverpool City Council. So it's a bit of a contrasting political situations on that. But I hope to that I can contribute positively to the committee and hopefully have done in the last 2 years. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr McLaughlin. We look forward to you working with us, all members of the committee, during your period in office and welcome your contribution to its work. Item 4, Statement of Accounts 2025/26, which is at page 11 of the agenda. The pre-audit Statement of Accounts for 2025/26 is included at Appendix A. It has been prepared in accordance with the Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting in the United Kingdom 2025/26. Mr Dickinson and Mr Woods, do you have anything to add to this report?
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to report the Council published its draft statement of accounts for the 25/26 by the statutory deadline of the 30th of June 2026. The accounts are currently subject to the public inspection period, which runs to the 11th of August. The accounts will be subject to an audit by external audit partners EY. The next agenda item sets out EY's external audit plan, which provides detail on the approach for the audit. The annual governance statement is also covered in item 9, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Questions from the committee? Councillor Chinnery.
Thank you, Chair. Looking forward to working with you over the next municipal year. We have a few questions over the unaudited accounts. Kind of a first open one, I think Councillor Raglan's will probably want to ask a similar question, is where do you get some of your statistics from? I think we noted that, yes, for example, 80% of houses in Brentwood are owner-occupied. For statistics like that, what's your source? And then going on from that, we were looking mainly at the narrative statement and challenges for the future. Now, at the end of the last municipal year, we were talking a lot about sale and the potential disposal of sale and the structural issues of that organisation that we identified at the last full council. Is there any reason why that's not been identified as a potential challenge for the future? Because I know it's going to be quite fundamental, but it's just really mentioned in passing in the accounts. That's all for now. Thank you.
Mr Dickinson, Mr Wood.
So on the source for, in reference to the narrative team, we get that mainly from our projects team, so I can clarify their actual source that comes from after this meeting, if that helps.
Thank you, Chair. I'll probably agree that maybe sale could have more prominence in the narrative. Quite a lot of work's happened on sale, and it is still viable, and there's a good income stream coming from it. But there is some uncertainty following or subsequent subject to the work that's been carried out. But it isn't as big an issue as potentially. So we could have put some more narrative, but I think we sort of weighed up that just referencing it would be sufficient for this these accounts.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. So there's always, in local government, there's always seems to be funding pressures. So this council's in a good position, but with the settlement and the 3-year settlement, it does put some pressure. Effectively, it's a flat settlement for the next 3 years, and with inflation being a bit higher than It has dropped, but been a bit higher than we initially thought. There is this this potential for, so it's not realised just yet, but there's this potential for pressures. But there are always pressures, and some of the key components, say, of the income and that to the council, such as sale and other areas, they're subject to potentially some pressures. So there aren't any current issues, but we're just looking ahead to see if there are going to be in the future.
Obviously, this is my first time in this committee as well, so spend some of the time. But obviously, you talk about like the 3-year project, but with LGR in mind and where we possibly might be, how are we scoping to navigate? And are we still looking, how far forward are we looking?
So is it, on the capital say programme or on revenue or both? Is it? Okay, so on the capital, quite a lot of the capital programme has been accelerated, so we are trying to get as much as we can agreed before LGR, but it's in a prudent way. So we're not looking to borrow; we're looking to use the capital receipts and the reserves. So that's on that side. On the revenue side, we are so this will be 27-28 will be the last budget that this council will set. But we are starting to look ahead to what the new unitary where Brentwood would be involved, so mid-Essex, what that will look like. So we are looking ahead and trying to hand over a council that's in a good financial position, as are Chelmsford, as are Malden, which is probably the big area of uncertainties around Essex and the disaggregation around that. But we are concentrating more on probably the next, so this year and next year, for especially the capital programme, but just to try and make sure that the council's in a strong position, and that goes the same with the audit and trying to get the audit won't be unqualified, but it will be in a much improved position.
Councillor Wagland.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I have a number of questions, and Councillor Chinnery is quite right that I will be interested in where we get our statistics from, just on that particular point. The suggestion that 80% is owner-occupied, I ran past actually a string of economists at a meeting I happened to be in earlier this week, and some of them thought that made sense and an awful lot of them didn't think it made sense, so they were very interested in how that was reflecting the privately rented sector. Yes, would be interested in that. More core, and Chair, if you again can tell me if I'm in the wrong place for raising this, or indeed if I try and do too many questions in this session, but what I'm interested in is which services are currently dependent on reserves and what happens when those are exhausted.
Mr. Dickinson.
My fault.
For 26-27, there's a balanced budget, so we're not looking to use reserves, and yeah, so that's currently the position. And in the future years, 27, 28, 28, 29, we're looking, if looking at it based on Brentwood, there isn't that pressure just yet. As I'm saying, there is the worry in the background around inflation, but currently we're not looking to use reserves. And the council does have on two sides. So it's got the reserves and then say capital receipts. It's in a very healthy position. There are a lot of other councils that are also equally in healthy positions, and there's some that aren't. But we are in a healthy position, and we're not looking to run down reserves outside of the capital programme for now.
LGR, and in particular the questions I think are all around timing, and so I was surprised not to see more about that in the narrative statement, and I appreciate the question of what LGR is going to come before us, and maybe even whether we're going to get LGR is considered by some to be up in the air, and we'll see what happens. But a lot of the report, let's just take one easy example. We've got a number of sums that have been paid by way of 106 monies which are being paid as substitute payments for affordable housing. Those go into our, I'll call it a reserve, but it isn't. They go into an account in order for us to be able to deal with those as part of our strategic housing building programming, as I understand it. But each one of those, I noticed from the accounts, has a 7-year period attached to it. So that's just one of the examples where it seems to me that we ought ideally to have, each time we say something like that, be it a footnote or whatever, that tells you how that is impacted by the fact that from next year there'll be a shadow board potentially, and from there on we'll be talking about whatever runoff is going to be provided for. But I think it would be very, very useful in the interests of transparency for that to be understood, because I think it frames a number of different questions around the impact of LGR and how we can time it in the very short term we have before it may happen.
Mr. Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair. So we definitely, it was probably a bit early when we were producing the statement of accounts to cover LGR, because you're sitting there thinking, well, I'll put that down, and then it's all changes. But so LGR is an issue as far as something that we need to be aware of and need to start budgeting for. But as an example, we haven't set aside specific budget for specific costs for LGR. We've just set it aside in a general reserve, and we'll allocate it as we get a bit more understanding, and from that we'll then report a bit more on sort of the costs and the pressures from LGR. Specifically on Section 106, so there was, Sam sent me the figures, but I think it's about 1.3 million was allocated last year from Section 106 to the SHDP, so the Housing Development Programme. And that will continue over the next 2 years, and that's part of the acceleration. It's getting those developments, paying the money and then allocating the funding to that. And so that is in the accounts, but maybe it's not as prominent as it could be. But there will be a separate report coming forward on Section 106 and on still later in the year, just to cover all those other smaller bits. It's easier to allocate to social housing currently with the programme that we have, but it's those smaller amounts to play fields and that we'll be concentrating on to make sure that gets allocated. Can't say everything will be allocated, but the intention is if we can, then we will try.
Quickly come back. I mean, the 7-year period is potentially more problematic than that, because you can't just put that money into a pot and say, right, that will now pay for our strategic housing programme, because it has consequences. The condition is 7 years, for example. So I'm really interested in how we're going to ring fence sums like that, how there will be transparency as to what those are being spent on in relation to individual housing projects. And I'm asked this all the time. To take just one example, the Carla Homes development in Ingatestone actually had a requirement that it would provide social housing, but managed to convince someone that it wasn't able to find a social housing provider, and therefore its money is a payment in lieu of providing that.
30 seconds.
And residents are asking if they can be told and see from the accounts how that treatment is dealt with. So if I may leave that there, Chair, but as a feedback, it isn't quite as straightforward as saying we just carry on as normal.
So on Section 106, it's normally quite restrictive. So even if it went into a unitary, there would be whatever was in the Section 106 agreement. It would need to adhere to that. Normally, the issue is being able to spend the money. So if there is some restrictions on it, then that would be to look at individual cases. Would be to look at the Section 106 agreement. So we can have a look at that and then provide some feedback if there are any restrictions. If there aren't any, as an example, and it was just available, then that would be available across the council and then across the unitary. But generally, with Section 106, it's quite restrictive on where it can be used and what it can be used for. Okay.
any further questions? If there are no further questions, then the recommendation is that the committee notes the contents of the report. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you. A vote to be taken by a show of hands. All those for? That's unanimous. The motion is carried. Thank you, members. Item 5. Brentwood Borough Council Provisional Audit Planning Report for the year ending the 31st of March 2026. The report begins at page 155 of your agenda pack. This report provides the Audit and Governance Committee with oversight of the plan for the external audit of the 2025-26 Statement of Accounts. Mr. Dickinson, do you have anything to add to this report?
Thank you, Chair. No, but I'd like to hand over to the external auditor to present the report.
Thank you. Over to you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everybody. So we present here our 25-26 audit plan for the year ended the 31st of March 2026. And I've got just a key few points to draw out, and I'm happy to take any questions. So page 8 to 10 of our report, which is page 66 to 168 of your pack, sets out our risk assessment to date. And you will note that the risks identified here remain unchanged from the prior year. This presents a positive position for the Council at the planning stage and heading into the year-end audit of the year-end accounts, which we've just heard in the previous item. So page 11 of our report, which is page 169 of the pack, sets out our materiality levels. As this is a provisional audit plan, this has been based on the prior year financial statements and will be updated now we've received the 25-26 financial statement figures in the coming weeks ahead of starting our audit. But the basis on which materiality is set will remain the same. Page 12 of our report, which is page 170 in your pack, sets out our VFM risk assessment, and I can confirm that we have not identified any risks of significant weakness up to this point. We will continue to assess this throughout the audit and bring any updates to this committee as appropriate in the future. We're working closely with the Council to undertake and complete our risk assessment in respect of build back of the audit opinion and report the results of this at the next committee. As mentioned in the covering report, we're planning to commence our year-end audit in October, and we're going to be working closely with the finance team between now and then to ensure this runs as smoothly as possible. So I'll stop there and I'm happy to take questions.
Questions from the committee? Councillor Chinnery.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, maybe a little bit of a tangent. I think working in kind of the corporate sphere myself, we're very concerned, optimistic about the use of AI with our work. I asked the same question last year, but how do you plan to use AI in your external audit, and has that changed much from the previous year?
Thank you. So as it stands for the 25-26 audit, there's no planned use of AI in terms of our audit strategy. Going into next year, we have a new audit approach coming in, which will feature more AI procedures, but as it stands for 25-26, will remain the same as last year.
Councillor Wagland.
Just following on from that, would that be generic AI for the year following, rather than the alternative, which is more word-based?
In terms of generic, what do you mean by that? Oh, generative. So it'll be a mixture of both, but it's very strongly controlled within a secure platform.
If there are no further questions from the committee, then the recommendation is that the committee notes the contents of the report. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you. A vote to be taken by a show of hands. All those for? That's unanimous. The motion is carried. Thank you. Item 6, internal audit update. You will find this at page 211 of your agenda pack. The appendices are reports from the Council's internal auditors, who are BDO, who are here with us tonight. Appendix A is intended to inform the Audit and Governance Committees of progress made against the 25-26 and 26-27 internal audit plans. Appendix B covers the progress by the organisation in delivering agreed actions arising from previous audits. Appendix C provides BDO's annual internal audit option for Brentwood Borough Council for 2025-26, and it summarises the internal audit work completed, key findings, assurance ratings, and recommendations. Appendices D, E, F, G, H, I, and J are reports in respect of recently completed audits. Mr. Winter and Mr. Billingham, do you have anything to add to the report? And welcome back.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. So, taking the first report as the progress report, which is Appendix A on page 215 onwards, we're going to focus that alongside the final reports in conjunction, together, get my words out, and then we'll pause for questions and then move on to the follow-up and then on to the annual reports. I would just like to say to councillors that the level of volume of reports that usually come to a committee meeting aren't usually this many. We had a slight delay in terms of the procurement exercise and being reappointed at last summer, so we actually didn't commence work until August following the approval of the plan. However, as the progress report states here, that the approval of the 26-27 plan was done in March committee meeting, so we've already commenced work, so therefore there will be a trajectory of reporting coming to each committee meeting. So I do apologise for the volume, but it was important that we closed down and reported to you. Of those 7 reports, you'll see there that we've got a fraud risk assessment advisory review. We've done a report on aids and adaptations, which received a moderate opinion driven by 3 medium, 3 low risk recommendations. A main financial systems audit, which covered payroll alongside some general ledger controls that we do on an annual basis. That received a moderate substantial opinion with 1 medium and 1 low risk finding. Trade waste, which received a moderate opinion, again, on 3 medium rated recommendations and 1 low. Climate change, which received a positive outcome of substantial with only 1 low risk recommendation. The project management review was advisory, although it did raise 4 recommendations. That was performed in an advisory nature to support the council on its ever-evolving project management framework. And then finally, the cybersecurity and supply chain audit received a limited opinion over design and moderate over operational effectiveness, which had 1 high risk finding, 3 medium, 2 low risk recs. As the Chair has quite rightly pointed out, we're also bringing our annual report, so the conclusion of that work means we've completed the 25-26 plan, and we'll come on to what that means for our annual report in due course. So that was all I was going to say in terms of the 25-26 plan. But obviously, Andrew and I, management, are happy to take any questions on progress, as well as the appendix of the final reports.
Questions from members? Councillor Leplain.
Thank you, Chair. One observation and well, a couple of observations. Certainly, in terms of the way that we receive the report, we get them hard copied in black and white. The details of, in terms of the circles and how they're colour coded make next to no sense. Even the colour version online is a little bit difficult for me being colourblind. So maybe a little bit of annotation to those indicators would make it a little easier for me. And one other observation, Chair, is that if we look at something like page 240, where we indicate communications, we'll see that there's a set of struck out dates, which I assume is dates that we look to achieve, but we didn't manage to do that. I would say that is a little bit troubling to see so many dates where they go forward. And this on that particular item under communications, it's given a priority level of median, even though it's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dates that have slipped. Does that have any weighting to these items, whether or not it's been outstanding for so long and so many date slips?
I'll take the question about the follow-up report. So I was going to come on to the follow-up report. So what we do is before every kind of audit committee, we follow up on recommendations that have become due, and then we report them in this follow-up report. If they miss their original implementation date, they go amber and they're listed as in progress. And if they miss their revised implementation date, they then become overdue, and then they remain in the overdue section until they've actually been implemented. If we compare this to where the council was a couple of years ago, this is actually quite a positive picture. So there's a lot less overdue recommendations here now than there was a couple of years ago. So the council has been moving in a positive direction. So that is good. And as we can see, so we followed up on 14 recommendations in this quarter. I think 9 of those were implemented. So that's a pretty good implementation rate. And obviously the overdue ones aren't. It's not ideal to have overdue recommendations, but it does happen. And if you look at the actual recommendations, some of them are broken down into different parts, and some of those parts have been implemented. So it's just a couple of bits which are still outstanding, which means we can't sign off those recommendations at the moment. So as part of the follow-up process, we will contact the responsible officer, ask them to explain to us how they've implemented that recommendation and provide evidence. And if we're satisfied, then we can sign that off as complete.
Councillor Wakeland.
Just a follow-up question really on cyber. Do we insure against risks in relation to cyber?
Thank you, Chair. So we have recently taken out insurance against cyber attacks. So we do have that insurance, and we do have support if there was to be an attack from the insurer. So that is a change that's recently happened.
Councillor Wakeland.
If I might just follow up on that, Chair, I rather suspect that you and I, and possibly others, would be interested to see the terms of that. And I'm just, they may or may not be commercially confidential. There may be some reason why we can't see them. But I think it would be a very good idea for us to know what what the risks are that are insured against. So that would be to see the policy, not the statement. But I think, given we've all coped with the 450 pages today, I'm fairly confident we can manage an insurance policy.
Thanks. Yeah, that should be fine. I'll double check, but that should be fine.
Ever since I was a member of this committee, cyber security has been one of those items on the agenda which I have religiously raised at almost every given opportunity, sometimes whether it was on the agenda or not. And I continue to be evangelical about making sure that it is done right and done better. I have taken the liberty of speaking to the senior leadership team earlier this week, having received the papers, to say that this should be a priority for them and for the relevant committee chairs, and that they should take this forward, which I'm happy to say they will be doing. The trouble is supply chain risks or risks for many organisations, including our own. Often it's the suppliers who are first compromised, and then the wider organisation suffers as a result, and therefore residents or indeed customers. I do think we do have good policies in place. But the trouble is that malicious actors, whether state-backed corporate criminals or things like that, will always try new tricks. And the tricks they use depend on who you are and who they're targeting. And obviously, while I think we are doing a good job, we clearly need to invest in systems, in processes, in actions and procedures. We need clear timelines to be able to make sure that that takes place. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the Council will fare, and I'm going to call upon Councillor Chinnery next.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, with the cybersecurity report, are you planning to explain that in more detail before we open for questions? Because most of them relate to that report. Thank you.
Councillor Chinnery, we wasn't going to go into the details, so we're going to take papers as read because of the volume, but I'm happy to outline, obviously, that I think the Chair has probably summarised it quite well there in terms of some of the key issues. What I would say from a cybersecurity and internal audit plan perspective, it's an annual theme, and you will see in this year's audit plan that we've got a revisit on cybersecurity, and we'll look at different components. So as part of previous plans, we've looked at the council's defence, their vulnerability management, etc. And then we've shifted onto the supply chain because actually that was where we've looked at one area, we're moving around to then look at where else you could be exposed. So next it probably, and we're in the process of scoping that with management, could be governance and training and awareness, for example. So hopefully that gives you context that we're not going to let this drop off of our radar.
And a question I have more generally is, last year, I think the first audit meeting I attended, we were talking a lot about procurement, and we had Officer James there from the Essex Procurement Partnership come and take questions from us. And I almost wonder from an organisational point of view, a lot of those recommendations, are they going to need to be implemented by the council or by Essex Procurement Partnership? Because I see almost a risk that you see those recommendations, that who's responsible for them? Is it something for the Essex Procurement Partnership to take up, or is it something that our officers need to be trained up on, because procurement, because we are such a small council, is often, well, is generally speaking done by Essex rather than us.
Mr. Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, when we were discussing this report, there were normally about 4 or 5 officers and Essex Procurement Partnership in the discussion. So it's definitely across both parts. So I think there's a lot of positives having Essex Procurement Partnership. They've got a lot of expertise that they can bring to the procurement phase, and they're doing a lot of work reviewing the contracts that we've got in place. But really, it's around also contract management, which is definitely with the officers. That's another Essex Procurement Partnership area, and that's the key area that management will be focusing on. So not just because of cyber, there are other maybe contracts that need to be focused on, and have that management of those contracts. So that's the focus for the next few months.
Councillor Fulcher.
Thank you, Chair. My question, there's in a paragraph on page 234, there's a mention of spot checks on contractors out of our service. On page 236, there's mention of monitoring of revs and bends. On 335, there's a mention of spot check, checks of access to financial systems. My question is, as we move towards local government reform and being a collective with other boroughs, how does the auditor approach the question of being effective by having unpredictability within checks when they may be covering a wider area of boroughs? How do we, is there advice that's given?
So obviously, with LGR on the horizon, and if it happens, etc., one of the things we've had to do as an auditor is think about pragmatic recommendations, and ensuring that what we recommend now will fix the issues in the immediate term, that therefore when that D-Day comes and there is a transition into a new environment, the control environment here at Brentwood is in the most strongest place it can be, and the council is handed over. So effectively, by implementing the recommendations, we are putting good practice in place that on transition, in comparability to some of the other organisations that we might not audit, I would say if Brentwood are in a good place, then it gives them a much better position to hand over that control environment, be operating effectively. So what we're doing at the moment is we're being pragmatic around, actually, if we recommended a whole new system needs to be implemented, that might not be feasible between now and LGR and that transition day. So I can't really say how I could advise how you would operate on a broader scale, but I think by having it right, having your own kind of homework marked well and doing the right things and the right checks and balances up until that point is then how you hand over this organisation into the best state it can be.
thank you for that answer.
Councillor Wagland.
Yes, what you were saying, Chair, made me think a little bit more about the insuring, and it occurred to me that insurance policies of that kind normally contain conditions that require performance of particular obligations on the part of a council, to take our example, which failure to comply with would produce a risk that there was no cover. And I just wonder whether anyone can give us the assurance, and that for this and for going forward, that someone has done the exercise of checking what those conditions are and that they are both complied with, and that the risk of non-compliance has been reflected in the documents we're doing, particularly for internal audit.
Mr. Dickinson.
Yep, I'll have a look into that and provide a response outside of this meeting, just covering those.
Thank you. Mr. Winter.
Our next report was the follow-up report. I was going to just turn to my colleague Andrew and check there was nothing you wanted to add on that report before moving on to the annual report, given we've touched on it.
No, there's nothing more.
Nothing. So happy to take any more questions on the follow-up or recommendations report before I move on to the annual report.
Councillor Chinnery.
Just to confirm, since it is the end of July, the communications follow-ups have been closed and met following kind of the latest rounds of meetings.
So when we start the follow-up process, we have to do it in a few weeks in advance of the audit committee. So it was the beginning of July into June when we started the follow-up process. So at that point in time, they still had until the end of July to kind of implement that recommendation. I think, as far as I know, that recommendation has not been implemented. I think it's to do with the communication strategy, and I think that is still in draft or is waiting to be approved. But I think it's been written but not been signed off as far as I'm aware. But I think maybe Mr. Dickinson might be able to answer that.
I can supply a brief update. I inquired about that very topic before I came into this room. The summary provided by Mr. Billingham is accurate, but budget was set aside in the last year's budget for posts to be filled to enable this recommendation to be dealt with. Recruitment processes, I believe, going to be shortly ongoing, and that following revisions to the communication strategy, we hope to be able to close this action off later on this year, certainly before the end of the calendar year. Councillor Fulcher.
Yeah, two further questions. On page 238, it read very well in terms of staff leaving and the processes in place. But do we have processes in place? Obviously, every employee leaves with a level of knowledge, information, and information of data. Is there anything we have in place to secure that?
Mr. Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair. So each service will vary, I guess, in what they have. But yeah, we generally, if someone leaves, we'll have access to the emails and we'll have access to the folders. And there is within each service working, ensuring their procedures and everything. So that if someone does leave, they leave something that someone can pick up and then continue with. But it does vary between service.
On 295, I'm still on the report, aren't I? 295, declarations of interest of officers. I'll just get to that page myself. So is this something that the findings are shown before us, but is this something that's expected of every officer a declaration of interest? Where is this held and how is this monitored?
I think so. I think that specifically refers to the aids and adaptations audit. So one of the officers had done the declarations of interest, but the manager who was responsible for that service hadn't actually done one. So our recommendation is to kind of allow both of them to do that. For a council as a whole, I think Mr Dickinson is probably better placed to answer whether the kind of the overall council process for declarations of interest. But
Yeah, okay. Councillor Vulture, through you, Chair. An audit's done by the finance team on every single member of staff. Okay, but the ones that are senior leadership, we publish the senior leadership's interests for transparency and declarations.
Just on this audit as well, I think this was raised as a low risk finding because obviously there was confirmation that they had no declaration, they had no interest, etc. It was more about formally documenting that and ensuring that's captured in such a small team. We were ensuring that that was a complete record, really. So it's a quick fix.
Thank you, that's reassuring. Thank you.
Mr McLaughlin.
Councillor Fulcher's question and raising page 295 has brought us back to the root cause, and it's a general point I've got, is the lack of understanding of the importance of completing declaration of interest form. That there is a bit ambiguous. Is it the individual, which it seems to suggest there, rather than throughout the organisation? So I do think we do need to be clearer as to what the actual root cause is. So, and probably one to look at in a few other places as well, really. Can we pinpoint what the actual cause is?
Take that point exactly. Yeah, I think that was a specific example in that they probably were lacking the understanding of making a formal record of there being no declaration of interest, and we'll feed that back to the auditor in question. I'm also conscious that in the printed version of this, it kind of cuts off and says does not, and then the sentence doesn't finish. I don't know if it's just on my record. So just to say that it said does not, it should say then capture this formally. That was what it would be saying. So the next report I was going to present was Appendix C on page 234 onwards, and this is our annual report and Head of Internal Audit opinion, and I'm providing that in our capacity as an outsourced internal audit provider. So it summarises all the outcomes of the work conducted for the 25-26 year, and obviously provides an opinion that then supports the Council's annual governance statement. So while previous members of the committee, and if you've sat on the previous committee before, may be familiar with certain wording and the purpose of this report, there has been some changes with the introduction of the Global Internal Audit Standards at the beginning of the financial year, 1st of April 2025. As a firm, we've reviewed our annual opinion, so if you were going to go back 12 months and compare what we said last year to this year, slightly different wording, but we were consistent in terms of the second highest rating. So as a result of all the work that we've done, the key themes, the implementation of recommendations, but also considering some of the other insurance mechanisms that this committee received in terms of external audit, some of the annual fraud and updates you get there, we've landed on the result of a generally satisfactory with improvement required in some areas. Doesn't roll off the tongue very well, but this is consistent wording we use across all industries now from a BDO perspective. And as I said, it's the second highest rating, so is mirroring the fact that there's actually been a positive trajectory in terms of the outcomes from our work over previous years. So this report does say from 23-24 there's been a reduction in high risk findings and limited opinion outcomes from our audits. On page 249 or page 7 of our report, this is where we offer a bit of a thematic review of what we've reviewed over the year, and actually is there anything systemic there that would bring that opinion down. And what it does flag to us is there are some common areas, but actually they're specific to the areas isolated that we've reviewed. So cyber security, for example, and out of hours are referenced in there, and it meant that we were comfortable in being the second highest rated opinion for the year. And it's always really important that when we come to the year, we reflect on the fact that there is an expectation that we will flag concerns and issues. We are risk focused, so therefore pointed to areas of potential concern or areas of improvement. So do not be scared if we are generating some limited and high risk findings. I think what's important is in how quickly management action that and provide some confidence and assurance that that has been addressed and won't be a reoccurring theme. So that was all I was going to say on our annual opinion, but obviously happy to take any questions.
Pleased to see that progress is being made. Any questions from members? Councillor Wagland.
Yes, I just wondered if you had a view in relation to the fact that the council is taking on more project-based work and how it manages to record transparently the overall cost of that work, including internal functions that are necessary in relation to, for example, a project like Brookfield or Ingleton House, and what happens about lessons learned, because for councils, of course, project management of a construction kind is something which is has always proved for local authorities a bit of a challenge to manage to keep them on track and to time and budget. So where would we find that, and do you as an internal auditor have concerns about the volume of what's now being taken on, and of course the LGR time frame that cuts in?
I think some of those questions are quite detailed in terms of the project kind of cost and how that is created, etc. But what I would point members to is obviously the report that we've produced, which, let me just get the right page reference, on 357, there's some high numbers there. We did a project management review, which was an advisory review, but it did produce some recommendations. And actually, to your point, Councillor, a couple of the recommendations we have flagged is strengthening the processes around monitoring against project timeliness, cost and budget, and in strengthening those controls, and also lessons learned and ensuring project closures are done and those themes are collated. So I can't give you a comment on kind of that. Those would be my concerns based on the work that we've done over project management. And actually, we were instructed by management to come and look at the evolving project management framework, because it was probably coming from a lower base, and therefore there've been some improvements occurring. We've done a health check on that to identify some better practices that could be applied. So I would say that even though this is advisory, we would look to follow up those recommendations and provide assurance that they've been addressed in a timely fashion, and obviously give that to the committee here, the assurance that if they're addressed, the council will be in a stronger position on their project delivery.
Mr Dickinson.
Thank you, Chair. So it could be a very long answer, so I'll try and keep it quite brief. But initially, when we look at the capacity within the team, and then part of the growth proposals that have been put forward around assets, and then it's looking at the capital programme and seeing where, and having a budget for each capital, for each asset. But that's just the start. It's not really nothing's really agreed then. It's then taken out, and there's different stages of review and looking at getting architects, and this whole process where they'll get a final cost and bring that to committee and then to council for agreement. And that will be the point where you've moved from probably just having a little bit of cost that you would need to write off, but it's fairly small, to getting substantial, and that would be signed off by a council. And then there'll be regular reporting throughout the process from the capital programme and so it'll be to the various committees. There'll be assets and to finance. But there's also we do try and be as transparent as possible. So if there are issues, they will be brought up early. But the main thing is that as a contract's agreed, that's the key risk point. And when that's finalised, then it's just monitoring and ensuring that it's completed. And then in the background, we'll be monitoring the supply chain and the suppliers and the like. And then the other side is recruitment and getting some good officers who have. So probably within the council at some point there wasn't all that expertise. It's been built up, but then there's also been brought in some external people who have had that experience of fairly large projects, and they supporting the team.
If I might just come back, I mean that I've been very impressed with the briefing I've had from Paul Underwood, for example, on Ingleton House, but it does carry with it quite a lot of confidence being placed in relationships, which is one of the elements of potentially stacking up problems in the future for the way in which a project can then become delayed and out of sync with where it should be. And I think it's interesting that that Paul was very comfortable about Brookfield as an example. We haven't, of course, got a contractor yet for Ingleton. Equally with Ingleton, the problems are all pre-contract, pretty much, and there are lessons learned, and I've asked a question about that at full council, so we'll see what comes back on that. But it is difficult to, it is problematic, I think, for local authorities to project manage those sorts of projects, because it isn't normally the day job. And I'm interested in your point that there are people out there who will still be willing to come to a local authority in order to take these roles, because traditionally that's been the problem for local authorities.
Yeah.
Further on, and it's somewhere around about 295, it was because Councillor Fulcher mentioned that area, but I did see one section where there had been a failure to monitor contractors and make sure that their prices actually married up, so that the hours didn't work when somebody was trying to do the analysis within the local authority. And there was a comment, cheerily, that says that the amounts weren't very high. And that's just an exemplar of what worries me about the way. Now, if that were in the private sector, that would be everybody all over it and trying to make sure that that didn't happen with a subcontractor. I just want to be sure that we have the resource, the time, and given that there are all sorts of other complications from LGR, that we are not going to have difficulties with managing these, that will relate to us being perhaps a bit Pollyanna-ish about projects which normally can throw up all sorts of problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so it is something we're conscious of. So you can have a good DM, and you can have someone that's maybe not as good, or they can mislead you. So there is some expertise, and there's some knowledge within the council where we can monitor that. But we are, I hate to say moving at pace, I hate that saying, but we are moving quite quickly to try and meet some target dates around, driven by LGR. But equally, we're being as diligent as we can, and so it's quite a tricky market out there around costs, and we are getting advice, and we are getting and we are taking time to look at the various options, and the final bit will then come to committee. So nothing's been agreed. The same with the SHDP, is that there's been it was stalled for a number of years, but then some work's been undertaken, not necessarily directly on value engineering or anything like that, but just trying to get a good product that is cost effective, that can then generate the returns that we're looking for. And that will be the same across all the different schemes. But there is an acknowledgement that we are moving quickly, and that we do probably need to have add a bit more resource to assets and that area.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose it's really to follow on from what Councillor Wagland's saying, obviously, that we're moving into the final stages of the Brentwood Leisure Centre project, if you know what I mean. And obviously, speaking with some of the officers on that, it is getting pushed through at a quicker rate because of what's coming up with LGR, if you know what I mean. So I think our concerns might be in that are we making the right precautions to make sure that we don't overspend on the project, and all of these are in place because of how quick we're moving to get things signed up, and we are not going to end up where we shouldn't end up, basically. Thank you.
Mr. Dickinson.
Yeah, so a lot of this is discussed at the Assets Committee, so then they do look into the various controls and pressures and the speed that capital program's been driven at. But I'll say that yes, they are conscious of that. Sometimes moving quickly can have its positives. There has, especially if there's inflation and there's quite a lot of bill costs going up, and so that's conscious of that, and you can do certain things, but ultimately it's still in the process of coming to a decision, and it's probably going to be in the next month or 2 months. So it'll be good to ask these questions and have that view, but it's a little bit early to be able to confirm just that outcome in the process just yet.
I think the thing is, like, how robust do you see your defences in spiraling costs and this sort of thing, really? If you know what I mean? How robust do you see them to pull back and make sure that these things don't happen?
I'd say fairly robust. It's a difficult market. So in March it was different. The inflation was going to come off and everything was going to be a bit different. Then there's inflation and there's pressure on things, but as a side, say as an example, Treasury's done really well out of the past 6 months, and so that's been a positive. But we are looking at the different developments. We are looking at containing the costs and looking at alternatives. But as I say, it's still in the. It's probably too early to outline that exactly what that entails. But in the next 2 months, there will be very detailed reports outlining all the process that's been followed and how a decision is available to be put forward for discussion and potentially agreement.
Thank you. We'll move on. Mr. Winter.
That was all of our reports, Chair. So unless there's any further questions, happy to move on.
Thank you. Councillor Chinnery.
If they're all the reports for the intel, just have a question on the climate change reports. Substantial. That is very nice reading on paper, but I noticed that you set out that we have kind of our statutory requirements to be net zero by 2050. We have a target, whether we like it or not, for 2030, and it's referenced that it should be noted that this audit does not provide a view or opinion on whether the council will achieve its overall objective of the net zero by 2030 target, but the purpose of the audit was to provide assurance over the arrangements they have in place to help meet its net zero obligations and manage the impacts of climate change. So is the audit looking at the 2050 target or the 2030 target, and why couldn't it have looked at its own very ambitious 2030 target, considering all the costs associated with it? So I just reading through it, I have a few more questions about kind of the background of that audit. Thank you.
For the Councillor, it was the 2030 target. However, what we were looking at was the governance arrangements and oversight. So hence why we always put that caveat in there that we're not performing science-based targets and looking at the data, etc. This is more about, have you got that overarching governance to get you to that point? And obviously there's a lot of different events that could occur that could impair that. So that's why we always caveat what we're giving them.
With the difference in the targets actually as well, wasn't 2050 the Essex County Council target and 2030 was Brentwood's council target? So there was a slight difference in the alignments. They had different targets.
I think I saw Councillor Fulcher's hand.
I wanted to say that the report comes back. It's really, let me see, it's detailed, and I think there's some incredible positives that come from the report about our progress on climate change and what's been achieved. I'd also, if I can take the opportunity to thank Mr. Winter, Ms. Bellingham, all the hard work in their audits, and what is really clear from being a member of this committee over a number of years, that we used to see progress needed on responses, but our awareness is certainly that there is excellent communication interdepartmentally, and it's really good to see, and it's I think it's worthy of complimenting.
Thank you, Councillor Fulcher, and I echo your positive sentiments in relation to the presentation of the report. If members have no further questions, then I shall move to the recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second, Chair.
The recommendation is as follows, that the committee notes the contents of the report. All those in favour? That's unanimous. The motion is carried. Item 7, Treasury Annual Report 2025-26. You will find the report at page 399 of your agenda pack. The Council is required by regulations issued under the Local Government Act to produce an annual Treasury Management Review of activities and the actual and prudential Treasury indicators for 2025-26. Mr. Dickinson and Mr. Woods, do you have anything to add to this report?
Thank you, Chair. Just one change. I think it's in the recommendation, the date was for the 15th of September. The council meeting there isn't one. So it's, I think it should be the 23rd of September. So apologies for that. And then just to highlight that this report is, it's an annual report. It picks up from just after Childerditch was sold and the repayment of a significant amount of debt to reduce the level of debt that the council had, and then the investment of the cash subsequently. Happy to take any questions.
Questions from the committee? Councillor Plain.
Let's a question more of a positive observation. On page 401, 1.12, the council did not undertake any external borrowing. Capital expenditure was financed through a combination of capital receipts, grants, etc. I think this is very positive. I think we've established for over a few years we've not extended any borrowing within the borough, and our debts are reflected as such. So it's a very positive message.
Councillor Sankey.
Yes, I'm going to endorse those comments, actually. If you look at page 403 on conclusion, quote, Treasury management activity during 25-26 was effective and prudent. Council delivered its capital programme without external borrowing, maintaining adequate liquidity, generated investment income above budget, and complied with its approved Treasury management framework and prudential indicators. So, yes, I agree with that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's a positive report, made more so by the contributions of both past members of this committee and hopefully its current ones. There's a good financial story to tell. If there are no further questions on this particular item, then I shall move to the amended recommendation, which will state the correct date of the next council meeting rather than some other date when we will not be present in this room. And so I'll go to that. The recommendation, do I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. Recommendation is as follows: that the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee reviews and agrees the Treasury Annual Report for 25-26 and recommends it to Council for approval on the 23rd of September 2026. A vote to be taken by a show of hands. All those in favour? That's unanimous. The motion is carried. I'm conscious that it's quite a hot evening, and if people would like to take their jackets off, then they are welcome to do so, should they so wish. I'll move to item 8, Fraud Service Annual Report 2024 to 25. You'll find this at page 407 of your agenda papers. The Fraud Service Annual Report for 2025-26 provides an overview of the work of the Fraud Service for the period from the 1st of April 2025 to the 31st of March 2026. Mr Dickinson, do you have anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. No, happy to take questions.
Questions from members? We've seen in the internal audit report some reference to fraud already, so there is a degree of crossover between the two. One question, Mr Dickinson, from myself is the resource that this council allocates towards this function is extremely valuable, and individual concern is to be thanked. But I wonder if we could be doing more of resourcing this individual perhaps more so that they are greater supported in their work, should you feel that necessary.
Thank you, Chair. That is something we're currently looking at. There is the fraud team, but there's also insurance and trying to ensure there's support for that function as well. So there's currently a paper where we're going to be reviewing, trying to move the fraud service, which I do think is a good service. We'll move it from maybe reactive to being proactive, and part of that review also will be a specific service for just for Brentwood. So there will be a fraud team for Brentwood, and there'll be different arrangements for Rochford. So I think those are the main areas that we'll be reviewing.
Thank you. Mr Winter and Mr Bellingham, obviously we've discussed the earlier internal audit report, but I just wondered if you had any reflections you'd like to share to members about the fraud service, seeing as you've looked at this relatively recently.
Yep, so I think we were minded of the number of individuals that the team had, and therefore what they're doing is a sterling job in terms of responding to and being reactive. I guess we were brought in to kind of compare to good practice and best practice, which does require resource and investment. So, but that was proactively done with the service, i.e. the individual and David's blessing in terms of doing that. So hopefully alongside what David's just outlined and what we've provided will help then strengthen that environment and be a bit more proactive in that regard. And just to obviously reassure members as well that throughout all of our work, while we're not responsible for identifying and preventing fraud, we consider the fraud risk in all of our internal audit reviews, and therefore would cooperate with the fraud service outlined in this report.
Mr McLaughlin.
Does the fraud service have external resources which it can draw upon for support if it needs it, or the ability to, if it had, say, several big frauds to deal with?
Not currently. It hasn't utilised that, but it would be able to get support from. It can get support from other councils around. From other Essex councils, but we haven't had to do that just yet. But they have had joint working with other councils as well around. I think some of the cases have been outlined in the report. But so they have that option, but they haven't had to do that currently.
Additionally, there is one limited resource. Is there any backlogging casework that needs to be dealt with? Because there's an implication that some things aren't fully addressed in the report, but is everything being addressed? And is it being addressed in a timely manner?
Yes, so last year there was quite a lot of pressure around from right to buy, so there was a focus there, and so that drew a lot of the person's time, but that's been replaced by other things that have turned up. But I think so in a reactive way, yes, I think the workload's fine, and that's why I did bring in insurance as well, because there is support for the insurance team as well. Because that's also a small team. When they go on holiday, you need someone to process the insurance and to be on top of that, and to a degree risk. So it's looking at both parts of that, but to move it to that proactive and not exactly looking for fraud, but being a bit more proactive in that area, then I think that the limitation would be on the resource there, and the officer has raised that a few times with me, so that's why we're looking into that.
Can I just add on that point? So the legislation recently changed in September 2025, where it says we now have to actively prevent fraud, and it's on that we think we could do more. So, thank you.
Councillor Wagland.
It was only a very quick point, which was that there's a lot of useful stuff about what fraud has actually been prevented or where things have been stopped. So whatever would have been the consequence of the fraud has not taken place. For example, the right to buy transaction doesn't take place. But I just wondered whether we do recoveries, because there's nothing in here about what happens if we have had somebody who's ripped us off, or indeed anyone else that's relevant. Do we get involved in any of that? I appreciate the Department for Work and Pensions deals with benefits, but is it just that because we're stopping them, we don't ever have to try and recover the money, or is it just that the fraudsters are always long gone, or what?
To what extent do we recover our civil frauds?
There is one case in particular we are trying to recover funds where there was fraud that went that happened. So yeah, we do take measures to try and recover the money as best we can.
Councillor Fulcher, then Councillor Thompson.
The mention of right to buy, the importance of that within the document was explained really well. I felt the increase of investigations being because of the decrease in the amount in which you could put towards a property. So that explained it really fully on page 421, and it was a very clear explanation. It was kind of preempted that sort of questioning, which was great. It was really good. Yeah.
I wasn't going to respond, but that's great. Was the question that it explained it quite well? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, because if it had just been, as sometimes is the case in committees, that you have these graphs, and there was just a great paragraph of explanation about that, which it was very clear why it was 32 applications, so, and a higher proportion of investigations, quite rightly so, because it was an increased amount of purchases. Yeah.
I'll go to Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. It was great to see, obviously, the prevention of 1.8 million, but forgive me if I didn't read it in there properly. What was the actual number that did slip through the net and was fraudulent? Do we have that? Thank you.
As far as we're aware, nothing has slipped through the net. So, yeah, I think that's the position, is that there were applications that were pushed back. The rest were accepted and were fine.
Sorry, excuse me, so we have no cases of any fraudulent claims or anything against the council anywhere? I'm going to pull you out on it, but we're obviously, excuse me, showing the fact that we prevented 1.8, which is a great number. But I just want to get to the fact that, okay, we stopped 1.8, but was there 500,000 that did get through the net, or whatever? At some number, we must have lost out somewhere. If you know what I mean, we couldn't have stopped absolutely everyone that was trying to do fraudulent activity towards the council. Thank you.
So specifically on right to buy, I think it's almost the safety net, so stopping applications as they come through. But if they meet the requirements as far as the fraud officer can investigate, they agree it, and so there wouldn't be, as far as we're aware of, any fraud there. There is one case which I think is mentioned around someone who was working at 2 jobs, and so that's currently a current case. So there would have been potentially some loss either from the the amount of time they spent working for the council, but it's because it's a bit of a live case still. I won't comment any more on that. But I'm not aware of anything outside of that. That we've had to, apart from say debts that we've had to write off, which I can get a report where there wouldn't be fraud, but it might be just the nature of the debt. But.
So I understand the point where obviously we're debts and we might write them off, and that's probably a different subject. So, but the investigations team never come back and said this one's got through the net. Yeah, and absolutely nothing that's gone through the council.
Not that I'm aware of. No, I'll go back and ask the person if there has been for the recent history. But since I've been here, there hasn't been anything that we wouldn't know about. So we could only pick up if you report saying that. Well, we report saying that we've saved that, but we don't know if there are any other fraudulent activities. It's just that the work and the requirements that she's covered is, in her view and in the view, it's that it's sufficient that that person could say, as an example, have a right to buy.
I'm not disbelieving, but I've never quite heard of an investigations team that's got 100% record. Like, no offence to anyone, if you know what I mean. So if you could look into that for me, that would be great. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify, so there's the fraud that that this report reports on, and then there's the refs and bends. So there's potentially more that's happened there, so I can get a separate report on that and feed it back to the committee.
I have a question. Page 423, paragraph 8.3.2. There was a tenant who had essentially two homes and abandoned his Brentwood home. We basically took action in relation to that. It says the recovery of the property has a financial outcome of £93,000. So presumably that relates to the value of the Brentwood property, which was effectively returned to the council. It wasn't a kind of payment of £93,000 that we'd recovered in that respect. It's just a straight release of the property back to us. That's correct, thank you. Any further questions on this item? If there are no further questions, then I have a recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you. The recommendation is as follows. That the committee notes the contents of the report. A vote to be taken by a show of hands. All those for? That's unanimous. The motion is carried. Mr Dickinson, if you wouldn't mind writing to Councillor Thompson after having taken this up with the officer just to clarify the points that he raised, I'm sure he would appreciate it, as would I. So. We move on. Item 9, Annual Governance Statement and Local Code of Corporate Governance, page 433. This report presents the revised Local Code of Governance and Annual Governance Statement, AGS 2025 to 2026. The report sets out their significance, key components and how they are implemented within the local government framework and seeks approval of both documents. Mrs Mayhew, do you have anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. I have nothing to add, but happy to take any questions.
Questions from members? If there are no further questions, then I will raise the recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
Chair, was you going to amend the recommendation?
Yes, I am going to amend the recommendation. And let me swiftly but decorously find the amended notation that I had set down on it. Recommendation is as follows. that the annual governance statement 2025-2026, as attached in Appendix A, is approved and signed by the Chief Executive and the Leader of the Council, and is approved and adopted by this committee. And then recommendation 2, that the committee approves and adopts the local code of corporate governance as set out in Appendix B. Are members happy with that amendment? Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second, Chair.
A vote to be taken by a show of hands. All those for? That's unanimous. The motion is carried. Thank you, members. Item 10. We're getting close to the end now. Appointment to the Constitution Working Group 2026-27, and you'll find this report at page 491 of your agenda papers. The Council has a statutory duty to maintain an up-to-date constitution under the Local Government Act 2000. The constitution must cover standing orders, delegations and codes of conduct for members. It can also have local conditions and rules that reflect its own area and how to make decisions. Mrs Mayhew, do you have anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add, but I'm happy to take any questions. Obviously, I will just highlight the membership, and I'm quite happy to take that offline with group leaders unless anyone knows that the nominations are tonight, and I'll take them.
Questions from members? Councillor Fulcher.
Yeah, my question was about the Constitutional Working Group's work plan, and did we once receive a report to Audit on the work plan, and can we expect it?
Okay, Councillor Fulcher, for you, Chair. Yes, the Constitution Working Group can report to the Audit, Governance and Standards Committee, or can go straight to full council. So obviously, if we've got a piece of work that needs to be done by deadline, it will go to straight to full council for them recommendations to be implemented as soon as possible. But I'm quite happy to bring back the work plan. It's here next time, so you can see the work that we're going to go through over the next period of months. So, yeah, that's not a problem. That can be done. Yeah, of course.
Next, I have Councillor Chinnery.
Thank you, Chair. Just to kind of confirm that from our group, take that offline and kind of we'll come back with our kind of nominee in the next few days. Thank you.
Mr McLaughlin.
Yeah, just following up from Councillor Fulcher's point, it is in the terms of reference of the committee that it does go back to the committee. So I think it's just we need to make sure that anything that's a committee responsibility is actually followed through.
Yeah, and thanks so much. Just to let you know, like the Constitution Working Group make recommendations, so that's why their recommendations don't come here, because then you could change them recommendations. Then recommendations need to go to council. But obviously, work plan, not a problem. Happy to share that with you all.
Last, by no means least, Councillor Plain.
Thank you, Chair. I have, for the last couple of years, been a member of the Constitution Working Group and chaired it on a couple of those years. It's a very positive, and we work collaboratively very well, ably led by the monitoring officer. I think one thing that we could possibly do as part of that group is to ensure, as each issue that's a recommendation that comes out either annual council or part of a committee, there is an originator of those that we can respond back to those originators with progress on their observations and how they want to deal with. So perhaps it's something we can institute.
Yes, Councillor Plain and councillors of this committee, obviously happy to take any ideas forward that members may have regarding the Constitution. And obviously, as you say, yeah, we'll discuss them, and if we feel that it's worthy to go forward as a recommendation to council, or we not take any further, they will be reported back to that member.
Thank you. If there are no further questions from members, then I will put the recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second, Chair.
The recommendation is as follows, are one, that the committee appoints a constitutional working group of 5 members, 1 from each political group, as set out in the report. A vote to be taken by a show of hands, all those for. That's unanimous. The motion is carried. Item 12, Committee Work Programme. You'll find this at page 495 of our agenda papers. This report sets out the work programme for the committee for the 2026-2027 municipal year. Mrs Mayhew and Mr Dickinson, do you have anything to add to the report?
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add.
Questions from the committee? Councillor Chinnery.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. Since this is a new merged committee and the Scrutiny, Performance and Standards Committee no longer exists, it's my understanding from the last full council, or the full council before last, that we still have in this committee some sort of scrutiny function. We haven't appointed members to I think it's the scrutiny subcommittee, so I just wanted to understand what the scrutiny function is for this committee. How can we as members decide if we want to pull something into scrutiny, and kind of I just want that practical understanding of how scrutiny is going to work going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chinnery. For you, Chair, yes, I totally understand what you're saying. I can bring a paper back, but I think the process we were sort of looking at going forward was, you know, you said the scrutiny form that you filled in and it was reviewed by officers and the Chair, whether to scrutinise that. I think that will still carry on. To form a working group, I think it needs certain sort of members to be on that working group. So with you, Chair, I think we need to probably just not just go, these are going to be the members of the working group, because everyone will bring something different. So if you're happy with that process, that we'll say that when we say we've got an item here to be scrutinised, let's form a working group, who wants to be on that working group? I'm saying that they all need to be cross-party, to be honest. As you say with the Constitution Working Group, I've said 5 members, totally cross-party, and I will stick with that, really. So if you do need to bring somebody in that's not on this committee, then we can deal with that when it comes to it. But I think we'll still go through that scrutiny form to fill in and see if it's got weight to it to be scrutinised fully in a working group, and that's how we can do it. Okay, but I can bring something back if you prefer, Councillor Chinnery, so you've got it. Yeah? Is that...
Any further questions from members on this item? Mr McLaughlin.
Is there something missing on between page 500 and 501 for things like the November meeting on that schedule?
Let us check. No, I don't believe so. I think what it is it's columnised,
Yeah.
but as anyone who's experienced a budget at this council will know, the papers for the budget meeting are voluminous, even more voluminous than we have before us today. And so although that particular column is small, the work of this committee in scrutinising the budget will be great. And then if you turn the page to 502, you will see that our last meeting of the municipal year, we have a number of items, and I suspect that that's why. But there's nothing more sinister in it than that, and I hope that's the explanation. If there are no further questions from members, then I will move the recommendation. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second, Chair.
The recommendation is as follows. R1, that the committee notes and endorses its work programme for the remainder of the municipal year and considers any further items that need to be added. A vote to be taken by a show of hands. All those for. That's unanimous. The motion is carried. Councillors and members, that concludes our business for this evening. Thank you very much to Ernst & Young and to BDO for their attendance and for the members of staff. Thank you very much and good evening.